as I've been going through year by year, and I'm sure people are figuring out I'm going through year by year, and I reached 1992. So we're up to the 1992 playoffs. And the playoffs in general seem to be more of a story than any one series. So I had thought about, I could have covered Pittsburgh and the Rangers round two, Chicago and Detroit round two, although that was a sweep. And then Chicago swept the Oilers right after that. Chicago entered the finals on an 8-game winning streak. Pittsburgh entered the finals on a 7-game winning streak. And at the time, I remember joking around that it looked like Pittsburgh and Chicago were in a hurry to get somewhere, and they wanted it done as quickly as possible. And the finals weren't really any different. The interesting part is that during the regular season, Pittsburgh 39-32-9, 343 goals, which was first, 308 goals against, which was 20th in the NHL. So again, their defense not quite good enough during the regular season. Chicago 36-29-15. They had 257 goals, which was 15th in the NHL. They had 236 goals against, which was second. Neither of these teams necessarily were favorites going into the playoffs. And of course, for Pittsburgh, it was an attempt to go back-to-back. And the other interesting part is every round one series went 6 or 7 games. There was no easy first-round matchup. So again, I thought, I could cover one of the first-round matchups, but this is interesting. Chicago sweeps Detroit and sweeps Edmonton to get to the finals. And I remember when they swept Edmonton, that 4-3 game in overtime I watched, and it was insane. That was a great game. And that was where Chicago kind of broke the Oilers. So the scores were 8-2, 4-2, 4-3, and 5-1. That was the close game. That was one where the Oilers looked like they had a chance, and then that was it. And that's really where the Oilers dynasty officially came to an end, was with that series. And the win over Detroit, 2-1, 3-1, 5-4, and 1-0. Every game in that second round series was close, but Chicago won it. And Jeremy Roenick was gaining quite the reputation, as was Belfour. Now, in getting to that Stanley Cup Finals, Pittsburgh was much slower on the uptake. So like I said, every series in the first round was 6 or 7 games. In that second round, they beat the Rangers 4-2 in Game 1. They lost Games 2 and 3. Game 3 was a 6-5 overtime loss. Game 4, they win 5-4 to even up the series, and then they win 3-2 and 5-1 to close things out in 6. Then they go in against the Boston Bruins, and as a Bruins fan, I remember this. They win 4-3 in overtime, and then the series was over. 5-2, 5-1, 5-1. They swept Boston aside, and they go into the finals. So again, this was a matchup between two teams on huge winning streaks. And by the end of this series, it's Pittsburgh that's on a huge winning streak, and Chicago's came to a grinding halt. Now, what's interesting in this is we see the emergence of Dominik Hasek during this series. We didn't expect that. And it's in a game that, Chicago loses it, but there were some highlight reel saves by Hasek which stand out. So, in the first game, first period, Chelios on the power play from Brent Sutter at 6:34. 1-0 Chicago. Goulet then scores at 13:17. Michel Goulet, a member of the Hawks. Dirk Graham then scores from Chris Chelios at 13:43. It is 3-0 Chicago in the first period. And I remember thinking, Chicago's winning streak continues. They came into this with a 10-game winning streak. They were going to keep it going. And this was going to be 11, and they were going to sweep Pittsburgh aside too. Phil Bourque scores on the power play from Tocchet and Francis at 17:26. This is a hockey card of Rick Tocchet. Tocchet was a big story in this one. So they added Francis, and they added Murphy the year before. They added Tocchet that year. Second period. It is Brent Sutter scoring from Larmer and Chelios at 11:36. That makes it 4-1 in favor of the Chicago Blackhawks. But Pittsburgh chips away. It's Tocchet from Stanton and McEachern at 15:24. And then it's Lemieux from Stevens at 16:23. So it's 4-3 Chicago after 2. Third period. Chicago holds that lead most of the period. Yager scores unassisted at 15:05, and then there's a power play in the last minute, and Lemieux scores. Mario Lemieux scores the winner from Murphy and Francis at 19:47. Belfour saves 34 out of 39. Brasso saves 30 out of 34. We go to Game 2. We're still in Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh scores in the first. It is Airy scoring from Pak at 9:52. Jim Pak, the only South Korean-born player to have played. And let me just Yeah, he's just from Seoul, South Korea. I was like, I want to double check where exactly he's from. Yep. Has a spouse named Courtney. Yeah, there you go. He's been a head coach for South Korea men's national hockey team since 2014, according to Wikipedia. And Wikipedia is always accurate, right? No? Okay, well, all right. Usually, kind of, sort of. Okay, so Pack gets the assist on that goal in the first. In the second period, we finish out the scoring. First is Marchment scoring from Noonan and Gilbert at 10:24. Brian Noonan would follow Mike Keenan around from one city to the next. It was kind of strange. And then there's a power play goal from Mario Lemieux from Rick Tocchet at 12:55 to restore the lead. And then Mario scores a second of the game from Tocchet and Samuelson at 15:23. So Mario, pretty good finals, 3-1, no scoring in the third. Belfour saves 22 out of 25 in the loss. Barrasso saves 18 out of 19. Chicago only managing 19 shots in Game 2. So Game 3 in Chicago. Chicago this time was the one that didn't allow a lot of shots. But it's Kevin Stevens scoring from Jimmy Pack and Rick Tocchet at 15:26. And that's it. That's your scoring. So second period, third period, no score. Tom Barrasso, 27 saves for the shutout. And Belfour with 19 saves on 20 shots. And coming out of that game, and combining these two games together, there was certainly some talk like, hey, maybe Barrasso should get the Conn Smythe. Well, I can understand that, but Mario Lemieux was a pretty good player, and yeah. Barrasso, though, was a much better goaltender than, and I want to say a better goaltender than he's remembered for being, because, again, for whatever reason, his standing, when you look at the overall goaltenders, I do think he probably belongs a little higher than he's remembered for, but it really depends. If you haven't heard much about Barrasso, that's too bad, because he really was one of the best goaltenders of, I want to say, from when he came in 84, 85, right through until a couple years after this. He was a pretty darn solid goaltender, and without that solid goaltending in Barrasso, 91 and 92 may have gone completely different. With Frank Pietrangelo from yesterday's video aside, or a couple days ago when I did that last video. So yeah, we go to Game 4. It's in Chicago. The Hawks need to fight to stay in this, and it's a shooting gallery early. Yager from Loney at 1:37. Graham scores from Matteau and Chelios at 6:21. Stefan Matteau followed Keenan around as well. Kevin Stevens then scores from Lemieux and Tocchet at 6:33. So it was tied for 12 seconds. And Dominic Hasek goes in the net. So what happens? Well, Graham scores from Chelios at 6:51. So that's 3 goals in 30 seconds. Yeah, that's the kind of game this was. This was an insane game. Power play goal then by Mario Lemieux from Murphy and Stevens at 10:13. But Dirk Graham would tie it up from Jocelyn Lemieux and Noonan at 16:18. So I don't know what's more surprising after the first period, that there's 6 goals scored or that half of them are from Dirk Graham. Pick whichever one you want. This was a series that had seen 5 goals in the previous 2 games and then sees 6 in the first period of Game 4. Now again, Chicago's fighting for their lives here. They don't get a lead. Second period, Tocchet scores from Lemieux and Stevens at 58 seconds to restore a lead. That's the 4th lead now for Pittsburgh. They hold that through most of the period before Jeremy Roenick scores from Noonan and Gilbert at 15:40. So it's a tie game again after 2. Third period, Murphy scores from Tocchet at 4:55, and then it's Francis scoring from McEachern and Pack at 7:59. Jim Pack, a lot of points for a guy that is easily forgotten by fans that weren't necessarily all that into that Stanley Cup final run for Pittsburgh. I remember I have an Upper Deck card which shows him holding up the Stanley Cup. I would think that's the happiest moment of his life, and nobody takes that away from him. So he probably doesn't care all that much if people remember or forget or any of that. Roenick would score from Grimson and Buskus at 11 minutes and 18 seconds, and that makes it a 6-5 game. That's as close as Chicago gets. So Barrasso, he holds when he has to. 24 saves on 29 shots for Tom Barrasso. And Belfour saved 2 out of 4. He's out of there. Hasek goes in, saves 21 out of 25. But like I said, he came out and checked, pretty sure it was a Mario breakaway, and he came out and knocked it away from him, which floored everybody. It was like, wait, what's that guy doing? Dominic Hasek showing some of the magic that he would later on with Buffalo and, of course, with Detroit. And, yeah. Now, in that series, Chris Chelios, a goal and 4 assists. Dirk Graham, 4 goals. 3 of them in the first period of Game 4, of course. Ed Belfour was 0-3 with an .875 save percentage. Hasek goes 0-1 because he took the loss in this one. .840 save percentage. But again, he was the talk coming out of that game. And Rick Tocchet, 2 goals and 6 assists. He's your number 1 scorer in the series. Mario Lemieux, 5 goals and 2 assists for 7 points in 4 games. Not bad for a Stanley Cup Finals. And again, just in 4 games. And Kevin Stevens, 2 goals and 3 assists for 5 points. Barrasso saves as many as he can. He goes 4-0 in the series. .908 save percentage. Pretty decent all around for Tom Barrasso and for the Pittsburgh Penguins. They were Stanley Cup champions the 2nd year in a row. And again, the interesting thing is that I was no Penguins fan at the time. I'm certainly not a Penguins fan now. But you have to respect what the team did. You have to respect them going back-to-back and how they did it. They win 3 in a row here, 4 here, and then 4 here. It was just once it clicked, there was no stopping them. And so pretty intense showing from the 92 Penguins. And it would be one of the more impressive Stanley Cup Finals runs that we saw, I would think, in history. But again, I know the Oilers had a pretty fantastic run during the 80s as well, where they barely lost anything. But winning 11 in a row to winning a Stanley Cup, it's not a bad little run for them. So, let me know your thoughts in the comment section below as always. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. And, yeah. Pittsburgh Penguins won it again in 92. And 93, things all kind of go sideways. So that'll be in the next video of this series. We'll be looking at 93. And likely one of the many upsets that took place in 1993. Thank you guys so much for all your support. As always, remember, be safe. Wash your hands. All that other wonderful stuff. And we'll come out safe on the other side of this. Thank you guys for everything. I'll talk to you again soon.